I will try to explore the historical and political landscape of Shi'i Islam, mainly focusing on the Najaf Seminary in the last 100 years or so. My lecture begins by establishing the foundational principles of my argument, tracing back basic history of the Najaf Seminary and outlining some characteristics of Shi'i clerical authority. And I will then proceed by bringing some examples. And that's pretty much the very core of my talk. One main point that I'm trying to, through those examples, illustrate is the very idea of Shi'i leadership, or Shi'i Marja'iyya, as being guardians of citadel of Shi'ism, as they would call it, or they are Hafiz Bidhat al-Islam, or Bidhat al-Shi'i. So that's the main point that I'm going to make by and through those examples. Because coming from the community, there has been sometimes these questions subconsciously, sometimes consciously, sometimes I can recite it or share it with my friends, that in different circumstances you're just saying that why Ayatollah doesn't say anything, why they are not doing this or that. So that's, I mean, sometimes, as I said, you can share it. Sometimes as a mughallid, you're just saying that perhaps something is there which I don't understand. Today, I'm trying to share with you this concept that maybe looking at different positions, especially when it comes to the socio-political, what's going on in Gaza or in Yemen, in Iran, in elsewhere, could shed some light on different positions or postures which those religious leaders has taken or are taking. So that's basically the crux of my talk. And as I said, I'm just going to bring a couple of examples. But before that, I just want to set the stage. The Najaf Seminary is, as Alex mentioned, quite beautifully, much more beautifully that I'm going to say, but is a cornerstone of Shi'ism and Islamic scholarship. This institution has played a pivotal role in the development of Shi'i thought and practice, not only in Iraq but across the world. The story of Shi'ism in Iraq dates back to Muslim conquest in 7th century. It was during this era that the first Shi'i communities began to emerge, notably when Salman the Persian, one of proud of us Persians, we're proud of him, a devoted disciple of Imam Ali, was appointed as the governor of Madain in the time. And then another transformative moment in the history of Shi'i Islam in Iraq was the founding of the Najaf Seminary by Sheikh al-Tusi in the 11th century. So although we are talking about the last 100 years, although Alex was talking about how seminary is been the beacon of scholarship, but we are talking about a millennium of history here, which is quite unique, not in terms of Islam itself, but generally speaking. So the rise of Najaf Seminary to prominence was a gradual process. It wasn't until the 19th century that Najaf became a central hub for Shi'i learning, marking a significant shift in its educational and theological stature. The seminary evolved over time, adapting to incorporate contemporary issues and challenges into its curriculum, thus maintaining its relevance and appeal and that's an ever basically going process. This evolution was significantly influenced by the 18th century's re-empowerment of Shi'i authority in Iraq, because if those of you who are interested, if you remember, Safavid fell in Iran, and then we had this sort of hostile Nader Shah. So ulamas of Isfahan and other cities had to migrate from Iran to neighboring Iraq, and that's provided this watershed moment for many cities in Iraq, especially Najaf. That's a basically modern renaissance of Najaf, because it was at this time that after fall of Safavid, Shi'i clerics or Shi'i leadership, in contrast to their Sunni counterparts, became quite independent of states. Okay, so they had to go back to the laity followers, and that's a quite unique, again, characteristic of ulama or Shi'i ulama in Iran. So I'm just trying to cover almost 13 centuries to bring you to the modern time, to the last 100 years. The development of Najaf Seminary or Hawza is a vital chapter in history of Islamic educational institutions. It reflects the evolution of religious and academic thought within the Islamic world. The seminary is more than just a physical location for learning. It represents a dynamic network that fosters the growth and dissemination of Shi'i theology, jurisprudence, and philosophy. The influence of Najaf Seminary, as you all know, extends well beyond the borders of Iraq. Its teaching and scholars have significantly impacted Shi'i communities around the globe through its scholars and alumni. So that's Najaf Seminary. So I'm just setting up the very location. Another introductory sort of slide which I want to go through is Shi'i clerical authority. So let me set the stage by reminding you of some basic definitions and premises of my talk. During the Shi'i imamate period, as it is known, a group of ardent students gathered around the infallible imams and took on the responsibility of continuing their teaching. The very Ayatul Nafar which Alex mentioned from Surah Tawbah was the very crux and background of that. This is where the formation of the clerical elite or ulama in Shia, in light of two Shi'i discourses emerge. First, imamate. So if you're asking why we have ulama among Shi'is, I would refer that to these two discourses within the faith. The discourse of imamate and the discourse of occultation. That how Shi'i believes, sorry if it's too basic and rudimentary, but I have to set the stage. Shi'i believed that it was the role of leadership went to 12 divinely assigned infallible imams after passing of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then how the last imam, the 12th imam, went to hiding to occultation in 941, and this is where this concept of general deputies of the infallible imam comes to fore. So after the minor occultation, 60 some years, in 941, the Ummah basically remained deprived of the infallible leaders. So what they have to do during this uncertain period, the last Imam itself, through his fourth or last specific deputy, asked them to refer to those among you who know better and who can just come up with their own ijtihad when it comes to hawadith al-waqa, or the contextual sort of circumstances. So, at the risk of oversimplification, the Shi'i clerical elite, as the general deputies of Imam, each with different expertise in jurisprudence, philosophy, and mysticism, in various centers and seminaries, have been carrying out this religious responsibility over the last 100 centuries. Here, when framing my argument about the Najaf leadership, I should stress that my focus will be only on Usuli jurists of Najaf. In contrast to the Akhbari scripturalist colleagues, Shi'i Usuli clerics advocate ijtihad, hence they are known as mujtahid. A legitimate ijtihad calls on Shi'i mujtahids to not only discover the truth from the principles, but also to consider all the sources which have probative force, weighting them against each other in an attempt to find the most probable ruling or fatwa. And in this process, we may have those mujtahids who are only capable of extracting part or greater parts of the rulings. Hence, mujtahid as the general deputies of the infallible Imam, the last Imam, are responsible for giving legal opinions and issuing religious commandments. So it is incumbent on them to come up with their rulings or their position, or whether it's political, social, or religious, while the Imam is in occultation. And since the mid-19th century, in contrast to Sunni counterparts, as I said, the Shi'i clerical authority has become independent of the state. The position of Marja Taqlid has been detached from any worldly funds by its definition, thus it is more capable of attaining the trust of its followers to receive their religious taxes and distribute these among fellow religious students properly. It was, and that's where my argument starts, on the back of this authority, the power to mobilize their followers, the different high-ranking mujtahids played key roles throughout the history, and as I said, specifically in Iraq. My point throughout this talk, and to be honest, in basically all my writings, publications, and talks concerning the Shi'i ulama in the modern world, is that when it comes to the socio-political role of the clergy and clerical authority, to understand position of Shi'i leadership, we simply need to look at the principle of Hifz Bizat al-Islam, or protecting the citadel of Islam. And in the Shi'i Usuli lexicon, as the most illuminating concept, this helps us to understand how various Shi'i leaders in different contexts have come up with different conceptualization of what is Bizat al-Islam at this given time, and how as the guardian of this concept or this case, I have to act. Okay? So that's basically, very simply, what I'm going to bore you in next 25 minutes by going through all those cases, that how different leaders in Najaf seminaries, when it comes to different contextual changes in politics of modern Iraq, came up with their understanding of, okay, this is Bizat al-Islam now, and I am going to safeguard it by doing this, or by not doing this, which is perhaps as important, if not more important, than acting. And that's pretty much the very crux of our talk. So let's proceed as I try my best to cover modern history of Iraq and how the leadership of Najaf responded. So I'm going to bring a couple of examples and case studies, and I did my best to pick those examples which, in a sense, as a whole, become quite comprehensive, if not exhaustive, to showcase different leaders in Najaf in different events. So first and foremost, 1920 revolution. Although many of the Shi'i mujtahids in Najaf, so that's basically the historical like kind of narration that while a couple of years earlier than 1920, Najaf leadership was quite instrumental in establishment of constitutional movement and revolution in Iran, but relatively speaking, they were quite abstained from the politics when it came to Iraq and then under tutelage of Ottoman Empire. However, with the outbreak of the First World War in Europe and the Ottoman alliance with Germany, the campaign, the Mesopotamia campaign, was launched, and in November 1914, British troops captured Basra and marched north into Iraq. The leader of Najaf Seminary at the time was Sayyid Muhammad Kazem Yazdi, who had seemingly led the quietist camp during the Persian constitutional revolution, in contrast to Akhund Khorasani at the time. But this time, facing the threat of British infidel as he perceived it, and to protect the citadel of Islam, he came up with this fatwa of jihad, which is quite unique in 1915. He urged all Muslims to join the forces against the non-believer British, and in the aftermath of the war, as British South to consolidate their control over the region, Yazdi passed away, and the leadership went to another leader, Muhammad Taghi Shirazi, then in Karbala. The 1920 revolution, Thawrat al-Ashrin as it is known in Iraq, was a nationwide struggle for the freedom and independence of the country. And it laid the very foundation of modern Iraq. And for the Shi'i community in Iraq, which played an unsurpassed role in the revolt, it represents a significant incident for Iraqi unity, though its outcome never served the Shi'i community as expected. So in May 1920, a group of Shi'i mujtahids, notable persons and tribal chiefs gathered in Karbala and met with Shirazi to make a joint decision on how to respond to the British occupation. Upon the convention, Shirazi issued a proclamation stating, "Be vigilant," and I'm quoting, "that your brothers in Baghdad, Qazemain, Najaf, Karbala, and other areas have come to a joint decision to demonstrate peacefully and demand their civil rights. They righteously ask for the independence of Iraq and the establishment of just Islamic rule. Hence, it is your duty to send your representative to Baghdad, maintaining peace and order and trying to prevent any internal schism. I also advise you to respect all opinions throughout this grand jihad." So if you're thinking about it, that in the aftermath of partition of Ottoman, it was quite instrumental role of Shi'i leadership of Karbala and Najaf in establishing this independent country. So those of you who know what happens next, you kind of understand the state of despair for the leadership after the establishment of the monarchy and the rest of it. They were quite instrumental, as I said, the cornerstone of what is known as modern Iraq. The turn of events and British politics against the call of the Mujtahid pushed them to orchestrate a popular uprising, and subsequently Shirazi issued another fatwa against the British, and indicating again that Iraqis, to protect the Bayt al-Islam, which was the land of Islam in this case. So this is how Shirazi, or what Shirazi constituted as Bayt al-Islam at the time, should march against the occupiers. By July 1920, vast areas of the mid and lower Euphrates had been liberated by protesters. Nonetheless, to the dismay of revolutionaries, Shirazi suddenly died, and the leadership transferred from Karbala to Najaf, and the revolt calmed down, and the belligerents agreed to a ceasefire. This was the very first time in modern Iraq that the Shi'i leadership actively endeavored to build an independent state for the nation of Iraq, or as my good friend Dr. Abbas Kadhim beautifully mentions in title of his book about this, to reclaim Iraq. The next is Shi'i leadership and under the Hashemite monarchy. The engagement of the Shi'i leadership in the 1920s revolt brought them nothing but despair. Death of leading Shi'i mujtahid who had steered the community towards independence from Britain, dealt a drastic blow to their political activism. And when the dust of the revolt settled, the British, seeking to bolster their presence in Iraq, established the Hashemite monarchy. So Faisal bin Hussein, who was not Iraqi, not Shi'i at the time, was basically established as the first king of Iraq. The community was then under the collective leadership of three mujtahid, Mehdi Khalisi from Kazamain, Abul Hasan Isfahani, and Naini in Najaf. And these leaders eventually allege they show they support of Faisal conditionally on not brokering bonds with Britain, or has to respect Iraq's sovereignty, and agreed his authority would be bound by an elected assembly of representatives. This is one of the most interesting episode in history of Iraq and Najaf Seminary. And I was writing a paper, and I end up at Kew Gardens National Archive to go through all these documents between the Foreign Office and Iraq at the time, because it's one of the darkest episode in history of Najaf Seminary, which if anything shows how politics, even their stature, comes secondary when it comes to this utmost responsibility of Shi'i leadership of protecting Bizat al-Islam. And I try to explain what was going on and what happened, and how this episode ended. The community was then, nonetheless, to further secure their mandate in Iraq, the British laid down the terms of Anglo-Iraqi Treaty. And for the treaty to be officially ratified, there was a need for a constituent assembly. And because these trio weren't confident about Faisal and the conditions which had been set already, they asked their followers to boycott the election. So in 1923, Khalisi was expelled from Iraq, and in response to what was perceived as an anti-Islamic act of the government, Isfahani and Naini moved to Iran to show their disdain for the new king. So if you think about it, at the time we had Ayatollah Khoei in Qom establishing the seminary in Qom, and in a sense, in a move to show their disdain, the Najaf Seminary remained leaderless. So all the leaders basically went to this self-exile to Iran. The Najaf Seminary and the Shi'i community in Iraq, evident cases of the citadel of Islam, were under threat while the leading mujtahids were miles away in Qom. Without them to manage the routine affairs of the seminary and the allocation of religious taxes among prospective students, the Najaf Seminary's survival was cast in doubt. Moreover, groups of religious students started to leave Najaf to attend lectures of Isfahani and Naini in Qom, and this trend of mass migration from Najaf to Qom eventually threatened to dismantle the most prominent Shi'i learning center of the time and posed a great threat to the citadel of Islam, or Shi'ism, as perceived by the self-exiled mujtahid. So this is one of the most threatening periods in history of Najaf, and its Shi'i leadership. The Hashemite monarch basically wasn't budging, and then the ulama in self-exile in Qom was worried about, okay, what's going to happen to Najaf and its seminary? So what should we do? Consequently, after the ratification of the treaty in Iraq, Isfahani and Naini sailed away to return to Iraq. And I just don't want to go too much into detail, but it was this sort of quite interesting, sometimes I mean hard to read, pledge and letter by Naini and Isfahani directed to Faisal, that basically if you let us back to Najaf, we are going to commit to not talk about politics or anything about Iraqi politics or internal politics. So that's basically quite moving position when it comes to Shi'i leadership, and how protecting a seminary, the institution, the city itself, came on top of everything else, even if they had to like kind of write such a pledge. So the two must assume quite its political posture for the rest of their lives, hoping to safeguard the Shi'i presence in Iraq. With the death of Grand Ayatollah Isfahani, I'm moving to the next case, which is the 1958 revolution in Iraq and the rise of communism. Marja'iyya shifted to Iran. With Bourguiba's rise in Qom, Sayyid Muhsin Al-Hakim focused his efforts on teaching and nurturing students at Najaf Seminary, and during the Hashemite reign, Hakim and his colleagues in Iraq managed to maintain a stable relationship with the state by staying out of politics, by basically remaining loyal to what their predecessors had pledged. But 1958 coup d'etat happened. This is the age of revolutions in the Middle East, more so towards the leftist communist camp at the time. The Cold War, those of you who are interested in politics, international relations, that's the period of Cold War, and the fall of the monarchy in Iraq in 1958, and the rise of Abdul Karim Qasim as the first president of Iraq provided an opportunity for the Shi'i religious leadership in Iraq to emerge from, their seminaries and become much more active. So after all, they pledged to the king, not the new regime. Yeah. So that is, this period 1958 to 1968. Is considered, when it comes to Shi'i political activism in Iraq, as the golden decade, because the leadership and in lower ranks, other clerics of Najaf managed to establish many institutions, most notably today Dawah Party, through this period. One of the most interesting and striking case which I wanted to talk about was this fatwa of Sayyid Muhsin Hakim against communism. So he didn't care that Qasim was in bed with communists at the time, but when he was asked about, okay, what do you think about all this Iraqi youth, Shi'i, Sunni, mostly Shi'i because they were underprivileged, joining communism and Iraqi Communist Party, ICP. What do you think? He didn't shy away. He came out quite boldly, said that Shi'iyya kufr wal ilhad. I think I have the letter and his handwriting over there, that how communism is basically tantamount to infidelity and atheism. So that is one fatwa which stopped this mass trend of underprivileged Shi'i sort of youth becoming members of the Communist Party. But that golden era, or golden age of Shi'i political activism in Iraq somehow ended in July 1968, when the Baath party hold to the power. The first 2 years of the Baath government coincided with the last years of Grand Ayatollah Muhsin Al-Hakim leadership, and the new regime implemented an exclusivist form of government in Iraq, intolerant of even the smallest opposition or tiniest opposition, leading to immediate confrontation between the state and the Shi'i clergy. And this is, perhaps many of you who are senior, much more senior than me, or senior than me, you remember I lived through this era myself, is the age of Saddam, or the Republic of Fear, as it is, popularized in Iraq. In 1979, Saddam became the new leader of Iraq, marking the beginning of the so-called Republic of Fear. He heavily relied on patronage and violence to maintain the state's his grasp of power, and his reign, characterized by continuous warfare, drained the nation's resources and led to widespread suffering, especially for the seminary and its leadership. I want to talk about three main points during Saddam, and how the leadership of Hawza tried to somehow survive under Saddam's rule. This is the guy who was basically quite brutal, not shying away. I think he did something that no other modern ruler, even Shah of Iran, didn't dare to do, and that was the mass killing of ulama who were just there to oppose him or being critical to him. Most notably Muhammad Baqir Sadr, who was this unique personality. Again, I'm not going into these figures for the sake of bragging about my book and sort of marketing it. If you want to know more, go and buy the book. But he was unique in a sense that he stood at the time at the middle of three Shi'i countries. Obviously in Iraq, in Najaf himself, but he was massive, and his teachings and intellectuals has massive influence on Iran, the Islamic Republic constitution, as well as through his cousin, those of you who know me and my writings, and on Lebanon, Imam Musa Saad, he was also active in Lebanon. So if we want to name one person who basically connect or personified sort of Shi'i transnationalism in 1970s, 1980s is Muhammad Baqir Sadr, who was killed by regime of Saddam. But perhaps that's the ostensible sort of case. Another case which nobody talks about his suffering is Grand Ayatollah Khoei. Yeah. So it is really harder than surviving and at the same time trying to protect the seminary against all this harsh sort of and repressive policies of Saddam. Over 70 years of teaching at Najaf Seminary, he fostered thousands of pious students and became known as the most revered Shi'i jurist of the occultation era. I mean, it might be controversial, but he is known as Afqahul Fuqaha during occultation, as it's known. Thank you. I don't have my mobile, so I don't know how long do I have. Okay. So when he assumed leadership in 1970, his position was, okay, in order to not poke Saddam, we are going to not engage in politics, so on and so forth. But it is the most precarious situation to be, because again, if you remember, I lived through it, many of you remember, the war with Iran happened. So it was Iran-Iraq war, 8 years of war, which engulfed more than 50% of Shi'i population in the world. One of the darkest, again, period in history of Shi'ism. That two majority Shi'i countries went to war basically on Saddam's miscalculation. But when you think about it, that you are this Shi'i marja residing in Najaf, and your followers, your mughallits, are both members of Iranian army and Iraqi army. So what's the position? I mean, what should you do? It's you know, sometimes when I put myself in, I mean, if I in their shoes, it's quite hard position to be in. But at the same time, you cannot support Iran, this majority country who is led by your colleagues, essentially, because Saddam and his brutal repressive regime is there, and you have to protect seminary. But at the same time, you cannot be indifferent about Iranian soldiers, Shi'is, basically dying in front. So that is basically how, or the area which Grand Ayatollah Khoei was or had to navigate through. But I have an argument, and the history shows us this argument is true, that he wasn't apolitical, so to speak. And one of the main cases which we can talk about is Intifada Sha'baniyya in uprising of 1991. In the aftermath of Gulf War in March 1991, the Iraqi uprising happened in southern Iraq. So it started from Basra, and courts from north joined the Shi'is of the south, and triggered by a speech given by President Bush, the father, in mid-February 1991, resentful Iraqis saw an opportunity to mobilize their resources in the hope of toppling Saddam. And this is, again, thinking about the community. The leadership came to the scene. The first step taken by the leadership was to manage the popular movement. The Grand Ayatollah issued a letter to his dear faithful children, advising them to respect Islamic values, bury corpses, and distribute food fairly among the poor. And this is, I mean, while the revolution was going on the streets of Najaf, Karbala, and 15 other provinces. However, a second letter issued by Khoei 2 days later was more authoritative. And this is my case against Ayatollah being not apolitical, so to speak. He appointed an executive committee to act as a reference point during this transition period, as the letter indicates. The letter said, "These days," and I quote, "as the country is witnessing critical circumstances, order must be preserved, security restored, the situation normalized, and the management of popular interest appropriately achieved. Consequently, the public interest urges us to assign a committee responsible for monitoring affairs in such a way that his decisions are tantamount to my wishes." So, in a sense, he instated a committee of 9 ulama in Najaf to basically to the tune of a council with executive power for the city of Najaf and Iraq as a whole. However, the event soon turned against the revolutionaries, especially when the international support they had anticipated never materialized, and Baath forces bearing placards declaring no Shi'is in Iraq from this day on brutally quelled the popular resistance, and by the last week of March, basically after almost a month, the whole thing was quashed. Khoei passed away months after, so that was basically the very last episode in life of Ayatollah Khoei. I'm just going to come back to finish my talk, or land in a sense, by referring to the invasion of Iraq and the role of the current leadership of Najaf Seminary, Grand Ayatollah Sistani. I don't think, I need to go too much into detail. You all know much better than me that how it was his pragmatism which saved Iraq, and most notably the Shi'i community in Iraq in the aftermath of the invasion, the US invasion in 2003. His pragmatic approach was developed to institutionalize the role of Marja'iyya and Shi'i clergy in socio-political affairs of post-Saddam Iraq. He played a crucial role in the process of leading to the first free election in Iraq, the 2005 general election, which basically brought back the authority to majority Shi'is and Shi'i population, something which they were deprived of since 1920 revolution. And finally, and most notably, is the fatwa, the June 2014 fatwa, perhaps the most significant move in post-2003 Iraq, and many would argue that in last 100 years of Shi'i history, that if you think about it, I started my examples by giving you the fatwa of jihad by Ayatollah Yazdi against Britain and British forces in 1915. 100 years later, 99 years later, this was only second to that first fatwa of jihad. So it shows that how if the leadership of Najaf sees a threat, he does whatever in his power and authority to protect it. The fatwa represents the highest degree of political activism. Just give you a way to compare, even Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran never issued a fatwa during Iran-Iraq war, fatwa of jihad. So that shows the uniqueness of the fatwa. And ironically, it came from a figure who was considered by many in the West to be the most prominent advocate of political quietism among the Shi'i clergy. So just to conclude, this last episode or last example brings me to my concluding remarks, and that is the utmost responsibility for Shi'i Maraja, especially those in Najaf, is to protect what they perceive as the Bizat al-Islam. And I would argue, as I argued elsewhere and written elsewhere, that the very city of Najaf and the seminary of Najaf is one of the most notable cases of Bizat al-Islam. So to guard Najaf and seminary is incumbent on all ayatollahs or marajas. So that shows how important this city is. And this duty of Hifz Bizat al-Islam, or protecting citadel of Islam, as illustrated in the position of Maraja during the Hashemite monarchy, or the stance of Ayatollah Khoei under the repressive Saddam regime and during the Iran-Iraq war, doesn't necessarily entail contentious action. Of course, in most cases, it has been used to justify Shi'i political activism, especially in defending the principles of the faith and community from the threat of outsiders, as we saw in the case of 1920 revolution, or Ayatollah Hakim's fatwa against communism, or Ayatollah Sistani's fatwa against ISIS. So being politically active or politically quiet is not the case, is not the question. Whether that activism or quietism serves the community or protecting the citadel of Shi'ism is the utmost basically responsibility and duty of ulama. And to this end, in modern Shi'i political thought, that's what they ever been vigilant about. And let us not overlook the significance of the city of Najaf and its seminary. Perhaps more than any other city globally, the flourishing and advancement of Najaf and its seminary are crucial to the sustenance of today's Shi'ism. This city, a millennium-old beacon of Islamic scholarship and a stronghold of Shi'ism, holds a unique position at the heart of every Shi'i, distinguishing itself as counterpart to any other city in the world. The survival and prosperity of Najaf have been shaped by numerous sacrifices, and its future now depends on adapting to contemporary realities. We can talk about that in Q&A, and the guidance of its forthcoming leaders, and this resonates deeply with the global Shi'i community. The religious institution in Najaf takes pride in its uniqueness. Therefore, the leader of the seminary, as history has demonstrated, bears the utmost responsibility not only about safeguarding the community, but also about maintaining the integrity of Najaf and its seminary itself.